Viewers and subscribers, greetings to you. In this episode of Time of Reckoning, I will take a little time to reflect on a few matters and issues that recently occupy the attention of some of our black thinkers. If I were to start locally, a video was circulated sometime this week on the island of Barbados, where a white man uses some racial slurs in a video. And the racial slurs were directed toward blacks. Of course, typical of situations like that, many black activists would come down heavily on such speeches. And so even whites are now joining in the call for this man to apologize and in their condemnation of him. And of course, that's appropriate that these ones be called out. But let's make it quite clear that persons who are of such thinking, that mindset, they have always been around and they will always be around. Let's be clear on it. There was a time when blacks were in the minority in certain parts of the world, like for example, during our enslavement, we were in the minority to groups that enslave us. In places like the United States, there is a large black population there, but they are still in the minority to those Caucasians who are in the majority there. So while we were in the minority, we were always fighting for what we thought were our rights. It is not surprising, therefore, if there are whites today who still believe in white elitism, in white supremacy, and in white privilege. And so they will, from time to time, speak out the way they feel in their mind about blacks. Some whites play the card very well, the card of sympathy, the card of I am with you, that is with blacks, very well. They often do. Because in a black majority society, like Barbados and many others of the Caribbean islands, whites depend heavily on blacks to patronize their business for them to be successful. And just about anywhere in the Western world that you find black people, the fact is we spend most of our money with white people, white businesses. That's a fact. So if they are prudent, they will even pretend to be sympathetic to the black cause, even a pretense. And it makes sense because their business depend heavily on us. But try as we may, we will always find those whites who cares very little or nothing at all about blacks, black people, black majority. They will have no regard for it. And so you might find a lone wolf here and there who is brave enough to speak their mind about how they feel, the scorn they feel for us being black. We must bear in mind also that the rich and the powerful, the slave owners, the enslavers, the slave masters, even when it get to the point where they felt it was necessary to free blacks who were enslaved, they still felt blacks were inferior. They still felt that way. And a white person in the confines of their houses, their homes, will of course seek to teach their children that whites are who they feel deep down that whites are. Many of them will be against, too much intermingling racially. We know these things happen in the privacy of their confines. And so we're not ever going to get rid of situations like we saw in that video where this white guy were using those racial slurs. Now, it is said that if something is wrong, if we as blacks deem something, a system, a political ideology, religious ideology, racial ideology, whatever it is, if we deem something to be wrong, then we need to do more than just talking it down, speaking against it, all of which we should do. But it's important that we also set up something, institute something that we deem to be better, that attracts sufficient human capital to that which is better, that will literally kill that which we think to be wrong. So in other words, we can deal white supremacy the biggest blow by black unity. If blacks are united, then white supremacy will be dead. Don't you think so? And that's worth repeating. That black unity is the antidote for white supremacy. Now, oftentimes, we find that black unity meet hurdles that prevents us from reaching a lot of our goals. Over the years, starting with the Marcus Garvey movement in the 1920s, in fact, the UNIA, Marcus Garvey, was formed in 1914. But it really took a global appeal in the 1920s. But while the Garvey movement was gaining grounds, there was another movement that was also gaining traction, the NAACP. And these were two black organizations that were agitating for the black cause, but they were not together. I often wonder what would have happened if there could be a camaraderie between those two organizations. But it did not happen. The enemies were allowed to divide both organizations to our peril. And since that time, we find a number of black organizations that rises and sometimes fall. And as much as we have one common intention, we never seem to be able to unite around a cause that defeats white supremacy. We have a number of black organizations that exist primarily in names only. And I could reel a number of them past and present off the top of my head, which I will not do by name, but those of you who are listening will identify a number of these organizations. Black organizations with very noble objectives, but some exist in name only. The human capital that is desperately required for these organizations to achieve their objectives simply are not there. And so when we hear about the black struggles, when we hear about lone wolves, whites, who will speak condemningly of blacks, and we speak out against these, as it were, bring the hammer down on them, it's the right thing to do, but we still have to turn inward and ask ourselves, when are we going to build a serious movement of black unity that really seriously challenge white supremacy? Because what these guys are doing is what they deem to be in their best interests. And everybody is supposed to do what they deem to be in their best interests. So the white man is going to look for the white's interests. And nothing is wrong with that. We should not expect that whites are going to be looking out for our interests against theirs. But there are enough of us to look out for our own interests. You know, I make reference to the Garvey movement of the 1920s, and it was a powerful movement. To this day, most black organizations find some kind of guidance and some kind of philosophical underpinning from the Garvey movement, because it was perhaps the first and only serious black movement that challenged white supremacy. It was not defeated in the sense that residue of it still exists in the world today, but it did not succeed sufficiently to put blacks where they ought to have been at the moment. Now, why is it that there seems to be this impediment to black unity? Why is it? When one person speaks on black issues, there are another set of blacks who find some fault why what that person or that group is saying can't work. And as a result, another black group is formed, and another one is formed, and another one is formed. And so we get into this downward spiral of forming organizations all the time and not able to take any one of those formed organizations to the zenith. One of the reasons seems to be that we are allowing the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And we are wisely advised not to do that. Do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. There is no perfect organization. And we will never succeed in forming a perfect organization. Just about every philosophy has its downside to it. There is no perfect philosophy, you know. So if we are waiting until a perfect organization is formed, one that ideologically pleases every last person that is black, we will never start, you know. Now we have another mass movement called Black Lives Matter. Is there something in that mass movement that can result in black unity? You know, we need to seriously think about it. But since Black Lives Matter have been formed and has gained quite a bit of traction in the world, there are those who still question what underpins the philosophy of that movement. You know, so again, I ask, can we search inward to see if there is something in Black Lives Matter that can lead the way to black unity? The Garvey movement made a great start. Marcus Garvey did say there were many cubs in the fold. So is Black Lives Matter and that movement one of the means by and through which black unity can be achieved? or there have to be others, you know? So I just want to say that we need to form this unity among ourselves that without literally agitating, without speaking, we defeat white supremacy by our unity. We don't have to take the hammer to the head of someone who says something defamatory about the black race. If by our example we can unite. Marcus Garvey once said that the problem with the black race is not their color, it's their condition. And there's some truth to that. Our condition is more of a problem than the color of our skin. We find it very difficult to unite. And as a consequence of that, groups that are more united, groups that seems more insightful, are able to pick our leaders off one after the other. And so all sorts of interest groups seems to be able to pick off our black leaders. And so rather than advancing, we find ourselves being stagnated and still yet to reach that goal of black international unity. There are those who question whether or not we need to be united to go forward. There are those who question whether or not we need leadership to be united. But the fact is, we're still yet to be united. That human capital that is so vitally necessary for any organization to go forward. If we are going to go forward as a cohesive whole, then something must be used as our underpinning. What is the philosophy? I look forward to some feedback on this very important issue. And so I want to thank you for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. And as usual, please give me your feedback. Until we talk again, until another episode of Time of Reckoning, so long.